So, as my colleague said, the Residential Tenancies, Student Rents and Other Protections COVID-19 Bill 2021 seeks to end the rip-off of students and their families. And I would first like to commend the USI and indeed my previous speaker, my own colleague Owen O'Brien, and his team for the work that they have done on this bill. I would also like to acknowledge all those in opposition, the 56 TDs who have already signed the bill. We are living through a housing crisis that has a real impact on access to third-level education, especially for people living outside the cities and the large towns. But despite having the highest fees in the EU, accommodation is, for many families, the biggest financial barrier to getting students to third-level education, particularly those from rural Ireland. And students are often on low-paid part-time work or rely on the support of their families that their families can afford to give them. Students are treated different by landlords, particularly those in purpose-built student accommodation, where they are often asked to pay a full semester of rent in advance. But we have to be cognizant of the financial situation of both the students themselves, who haven't been able to get employment in the pandemic, and also on families, on parents and on siblings who have also lost employment. And we saw the other day from the figures released, I think it was from Social Justice Ireland or Vincent de Paul, where working families, where such a high number, I think it was a quarter of working families, are living in poverty. And these are the same people that we have allowed to be robbed, I would say, in the last year because of paying for something up front that they actually then were prevented in law from using. But around 30,000 students live in private provided purpose-built student accommodation. And when the pandemic hit last March, it exposed the severe injustices students face in the rental market. They were on the hook for the accommodation that they no longer needed, and the vast majority never received any refund. Now, since Fine Gael came into government, they have given 87 million in tax breaks to purpose-built student accommodation providers. And despite this huge amount of public money, these landlords, many of them, have refused to issue refunds. Now, I want to commend the landlords who actually did issue refunds straight away. During the summer, after the experience of the first wave, I and others repeatedly warned of the risks faced by student renters if the college was to move online again. And students were given the optimistic assessments and positive headlines instead, when they needed the government to be straightforward and realistic with them. Now, the Minister for Further and Higher Education, Simon Harris, on the 31st of August, said that students were treated a bit shabbily, and I agree with him, when colleges closed their doors at the start of the pandemic. And he went on to say, if ever there were further restrictions and colleges had to close, we needed to make sure that all students got refunded. Now, that was a month before it was announced that students would not be returning to campus. Then in October, after colleges had moved online and the reports of students again being denied refunds began flooding into all our offices, I asked the Minister how he would ensure the students receive refunds, and the answer was he had no powers directly available to him under the current legal framework for private accommodation. Then, when I raised it with yourselves, Minister, and the housing officer, I was simply told that it was not within the remit of the department. So, this is why I really want to commend the USI for this and everybody who has worked on this bill, because government should have done this as emergency legislation in the first place. But it's never too late to do the right thing. Student renters were cast aside. They were overpromised and they were underprotected, and we can never ever allow that to happen again, Minister. The aim of this bill is to ensure that students are not left in this position again, and if the bill becomes law, the students will be able to end a tenancy in purpose-built student accommodation by serving the landlord with the notice of the termination of 28 days, as we said, and that they would get refunds back. I think we really, really owe it to the students of Ireland and to their families to right the wrong that was done to them since the beginning of the pandemic. If one of us went into a shop and we paid over 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000, as these families have been done. And then we were ordered to leave the shop without getting what we paid for, but told we would never get our money back. We would not accept it. So why should student renters be treated any different? There's a real opportunity here for us to work collectively across the House to put this right. Thank you, Minister.